Pick it up. The words came out calm, almost polite. Naomi was already on her knees when the glass shattered. The sound echoed across the marble floor, sharp, final, as red wine spread like a stain she couldn't erase. She froze. Not because she didn't understand the order, but because everyone was watching. Evelyn Harper didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She stood near the dining table, arms crossed lightly, head tilted with practiced patience. "Careful," she said softly. "Those floors are imported." Naomi reached for the paper towels with trembling hands. Her fingers brushed the cold glass shards first. Someone near the hallway laughed. Quick, quiet, disappeared. Evelyn sighed, the kind of sigh reserved for children who disappoint. "Honestly," she murmured, glancing around the room, "this is why I hate letting others handle expensive things." Naomi's face burned. She could feel the heat climbing her neck, the weight of eyes that didn't see her. They measured her. She wiped the floor slowly, carefully, deliberately, because reacting would cost her more than silence ever could. From the doorway upstairs, a small figure watched, unseen, unmoving. And for the first time, someone noticed she never spoke back. But this didn't start that day. Before continuing, please comment on where you're listening from. It's good to know how many hearts my stories are touching. Subscribe and like to help the channel. You'll receive emotional stories frequently. Thank you. The strong smell of cleaning products still hung in the air when Naomi finished drying the floor, an acidic, lingering scent that seeped into her throat and wouldn't leave easily. It mixed with the expensive perfume coming from the dining room. Too many floral notes, too artificial, creating a strange, almost suffocating combination. She put the cloths away with excessive care. She folded each one as if she were being watched, even when no one seemed to be paying attention. The silence of the house was heavy. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was the silence of surveillance. The clock on the kitchen wall read 6:40. The ticking was low but steady, like a reminder that time there never passed fast enough. Naomi washed her hands for longer than necessary. The water ran hot, almost scalding, but she didn't pull away. She looked at her own fingers, thin, marked with small old scars, as she took a deep breath, mentally counting to 10, then to 20, then to 30. She always did that, because losing control was not an option. On the other side of the house, the children laughed. A light, carefree laugh that didn't match the tense atmosphere of the main hallways. The sound came from the bedroom upstairs, where the light entered more generously through the wide windows. Naomi climbed the stairs slowly. Each step creaked in a different way. She knew exactly where to step so she wouldn't make noise. She had learned this in her first weeks in that house, not because of an explicit demand, but out of necessity. There were rules there that were never spoken out loud. In the girls' room, the air was different. It smelled like baby soap, clean sheets, and something sweet, maybe cookies hidden in a drawer. The walls were light, decorated with hand-drawn pictures held up with colorful tape. It was the only place in the house where Naomi felt she could breathe a little better. "Naomi!" one of the girls called out, opening her arms. She smiled automatically. The smile wasn't forced. It never was with them. "Is it story time yet?" the other asked, sitting up in bed. Naomi nodded, sitting between the two of them. She took the book from the shelf, the one they had already read dozens of times. The pages were worn, folded at the corners, but that seemed to comfort the children. As she read, her voice was calm, steady, almost hypnotic. But inside, something was still trembling. She knew that, at any moment, the sharp sound of Evelyn's heels could echo through the hallway. She knew that just one detail out of place, a toy on the floor, a towel folded wrong, was enough for the mood to change again. And yet, she kept going. Because she had to. Because there was someone waiting for her at the end of the day. When she finished the story, she covered the girls with the comforter and turned off the light. One of them held her hand for longer than usual. "Are you leaving?" she whispered. Naomi hesitated for a second. "Not right now," she replied carefully. The girl nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Naomi stayed there for a few more seconds, watching their peaceful faces, so different from the tension that dominated the rest of the house. Then she stood up and left quietly, closing the door gently. In the hallway, the light was cold, impersonal. Evelyn was in the kitchen when Naomi came downstairs. Sitting at the table, she scrolled through her phone with one hand, while the other held a glass of wine. Another one. The red liquid reflected the white light from the ceiling. Without looking up, she spoke. "We have guests coming tomorrow. I want the house spotless." A short pause. "Especially the bedrooms." Naomi nodded. "And please," Evelyn continued, now looking up, "try not to draw so much attention. People get uncomfortable when—" She made a vague gesture with her hand. "There are too many staff members moving around." The tone was neutral, polite. But something in that sentence hung in the air. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. "Yes, ma'am," she replied softly. Evelyn smiled, satisfied, and went back to her phone. Naomi moved away slowly, the sound of her footsteps almost non-existent on the expensive floor. As she entered the small maid's room, she closed the door behind her and leaned her forehead against the cold wood. She took a deep breath. There, alone, she allowed her shoulders to drop a little. She took her phone out of her pocket and looked at the locked screen. An old notification was still there, unanswered. Central Hospital. Appointment reminder. Naomi closed her eyes. That was why. It was always because of that. She put the phone away, straightened her posture, and left the room. Because in that world, her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. And no one in that house yet understood the price of it. There was a reason why Naomi never reacted, and it wasn't weakness. Every morning, even before the sun touched the tallest buildings, she crossed the city in silence. The bus smelled like heated metal and old coffee. The seats creaked with every turn. People avoided eye contact, trapped in their own urgencies. Naomi always sat in the same spot. Not out of habit, but because the cell signal worked better from there. That was where she checked the messages from the hospital. There weren't always updates. Sometimes just cold, automatic reminders. Other times, requests for confirmation, schedule adjustments, pending bills. Her father's name appeared on the screen with a frequency that never diminished. She never complained, never out loud. The hospital room was small and excessively bright. The air conditioning made the room too cold, as if comfort were a secondary thought in there. The sound of the machines created a steady, almost hypnotic cadence. Naomi approached the bed with measured steps. "It's me," she said quietly, even when he was asleep. She held her father's hand for a few seconds. Enough to remember why she kept going. Enough to reinforce the weight of the choice she had made. She had learned early on that jobs don't like long explanations, and hospitals don't like delays. That was why, when the opening at the Harper house came up, Naomi didn't ask many questions. The salary was stable. The contract seemed secure. And there was one detail that weighed more than any other. Housing was included. She accepted the same day. At first, Evelyn Harper seemed only strict, very organized, very attentive, very proper. "I like everything done the right way," she would say, smiling. "Don't take it personally." And Naomi didn't take it personally, in the beginning. But over time, the phrases began to change. "You need to move with more care. Try not to take up so much space. The children get restless when there is too much presence." Always in a low voice. Always with words that were too carefully chosen. Then came the comments that weren't exactly accusations, but weren't neutral either. "You speak well, actually. It must have been hard growing up without much structure. Some people don't know how to recognize opportunities." Evelyn never raised her voice, never screamed, never lost her composure. That was what made it all harder to challenge. Naomi absorbed every word in silence, because every time she thought about reacting, she saw her father's face. She saw the expensive medication. She saw the doctor explaining, with excessive care, that the treatment could not be interrupted. She swallowed hard, and she moved on. At night, in the small staff room, Naomi stared at the ceiling for long minutes before sleeping. Exhaustion weighed on her, but her mind wouldn't shut off. Sometimes she wondered how long she could last. The answer was always the same, just a little longer. It was on one of those nights that she started noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. Small dark spots in the corners of the ceiling. Discrete lenses, almost invisible. Tiny lights that blinked intermittently. Cameras. She didn't know if they worked. She didn't know if they recorded. much less if they had audio. But she knew they were there, and it confused her. Because if there were cameras, someone should know what was happening in that house. Naomi never commented on it. She never asked. But in silence, she began to wonder if Daniel Harper, the always absent husband, had any idea what was really going on there. She saw him rarely. Always polite, always distant, always in a hurry, but never cruel. And for the first time in a long time, Naomi allowed herself a dangerous thought. Maybe he isn't like her. Meanwhile, Evelyn seemed increasingly comfortable. "Daniel trusts me," she commented one afternoon, arranging flowers in the living room. "He hates conflict, and he doesn't waste time on small things." She laughed, pleased with herself. Naomi kept cleaning the counter in silence. Something in that sentence kept echoing. He doesn't waste time. Maybe it was true. Maybe that was why no one had ever stopped this. But maybe, just maybe, silence wouldn't be invisible forever. That week, Daniel Harper would be coming home. And without knowing exactly why, Naomi felt a strange tightness in her chest. It wasn't hope. It was expectation. And expectation, she knew, could be dangerous. Somewhere on the ceiling, a camera remained still. Daniel Harper's arrival altered the rhythm of the house in an almost imperceptible way. Nothing officially changed. The schedules stayed the same. The rules, intact. Evelyn maintained her flawless smile and elegant posture as always. But the air felt denser, as if something were being watched. Daniel arrived in the early evening, bringing with him the smell of the airport and exhaustion. He hugged his daughters tightly, laughing too loud for a few seconds, as if trying to make up for his long absence. "You've grown," he said, surprised. The girls smiled, but soon looked at Naomi, almost instinctively, as if seeking permission to stay there. Daniel noticed. It was quick, a minimal detail, but enough to make him slightly furrow his brow. During dinner, Naomi moved through the room with redoubled care. Evelyn talked about social commitments, charity events, important names. Daniel nodded distractedly, checking his phone between sentences. At one point, one of the girls asked, "Can Naomi sit with us today?" The silence lasted less than 1 second. "Of course not," Evelyn replied, smiling. "She's still working." Daniel looked at Naomi, then at his daughter. "It's fine," he said neutrally. "She can finish later." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. The smile remained, but something hardened in her gaze. Naomi felt her stomach tighten. But not knowing what to do, she ended up sitting at the table and eating. Later, in the kitchen, Evelyn took a glass that was in Naomi's hand, she was drinking, and dropped it by accident with an oops, as if it had slipped from her hand, and said, "Don't confuse kindness with permission. I don't want you sitting with us anymore." For a moment, Naomi felt anger, but she couldn't react. She had to take a deep breath, pick up the shards, and throw them away. The next day, Evelyn went further. "Some people only understand boundaries when they are reminded of their place, and usually those places are determined by birth," she said more quietly. "Or by lineage," she said while Naomi organized the pantry. A light was blinking on a camera. Usually the camera is always there, but Naomi wasn't used to paying attention to it. Naomi felt something different in that moment. Not fear, but clarity. If someone were watching, this would have stopped already. It was then that, for the first time, she made a silent decision. Without looking up, without theatrics, without any certainty. She stopped avoiding the visible spaces. If she was meant to be invisible, it wouldn't make a difference. And if she wasn't, maybe someone would finally see something. Evelyn believed that nothing, absolutely nothing, escaped her control. And it was that overconfidence that made her slip up. Evelyn Harper never needed to raise her voice to be obeyed. There was a precision in her gestures, an exact rhythm in how she walked through the rooms. Everything in that house seemed to adjust to her pace. Furniture in place, schedules respected, people aware of where they should or shouldn't be. She liked that. That morning, the house was too quiet. Evelyn noticed even before entering the kitchen. Naomi was setting the table carefully, as always. Silverware aligned, napkins folded, no visible mistakes. Still, Evelyn stopped for a second longer than usual, watching. You don't need to stay here, she said, without aggression. I'll finish. Naomi nodded, but didn't hurry. She adjusted a glass that was already straight, smoothed the tablecloth. Then she moved away. Evelyn followed every movement with her eyes. Something in that rhythm bothered her. It wasn't disobedience. It was presence. During lunch, Daniel talked with his daughters. He laughed. He asked questions that were too simple for someone used to meetings and big numbers. Naomi passed through the room carrying plates, collecting glasses. At one point, one of the girls pointed at her. Naomi knows where my coat is, she said naturally. Daniel smiled at Naomi. You save our lives, he commented, without thinking much. Evelyn's smile remained intact, but her fingers squeezed the napkin hard enough to mark it. Later, in the hallway, when Naomi passed her carrying folded clothes, Evelyn spoke quietly, almost like a reminder. Don't get confused. That was all. No direct threat, no explanation. Naomi didn't answer, but she didn't look away. She kept walking at the same pace, passing exactly through the spot where the ceiling light reflected differently. Where that small dark spot was in the corner, Evelyn noticed. Not the camera. The fact that Naomi didn't avoid the space. In the late afternoon, Evelyn entered the laundry room unannounced. Naomi was folding clothes in silence. This isn't right, Evelyn said, pointing to a perfectly organized pile. Naomi looked up, confused. Do you want me to redo it? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She approached slowly. She stopped too close. You've been distracted, she finally said. And distraction leads to mistakes. Naomi nodded. I pay attention, she replied softly. Evelyn tilted her head. Attention is not the same as understanding your place. Silence. The distant sound of the washing machine filled the space. Evelyn stepped back, satisfied. She left without looking back. Naomi stayed there, immobile. For a few seconds, she thought about leaving too. But she didn't. She just took a deep breath and continued folding the clothes, now more slowly, more visibly, each movement within the same angle. Nothing happened. Night fell, and with it came an artificial calm. During dinner, Evelyn spoke naturally about future commitments. Daniel listened, but his eyes were lost in small details. A forgotten glass, a toy on the floor, Naomi passing from one side of the room to the other. There was something different. He couldn't say what. After the children went to sleep, Naomi collected the last plates. Evelyn was in the kitchen, her back turned. We have guests tomorrow, she said, fiddling with something on the counter. I want everything spotless, Naomi confirmed. And remember, Evelyn continued, still without looking, some things don't need to be said, only understood. The sentence hung there. Naomi felt its weight settle slowly. When she left the kitchen, she passed through the main hallway without quickening her pace, without lowering her head, without hiding. It wasn't a challenge. It was exhaustion. Evelyn was left alone for a few seconds. She looked around. Then, for the first time in a long time, she walked to the light switch and turned it off, without noticing the small dark spot above her. Upstairs, Daniel entered his daughter's room to say goodnight. One of them hugged him too tight. Daddy? She began hesitantly. Daniel leaned in. What is it? The girl thought for a moment. Mommy talks to Naomi in a strange way when you're not here. Daniel froze. Strange how? The child shrugged. Like she's less. Daniel didn't answer. He just kissed his daughter's forehead and turned off the light. In the dark hallway, he stopped for a moment before heading to his room. Something in that house, something that had always been there, was finally starting to make noise, even in silence. Daniel Harper didn't sleep that night. Not because of a specific thought, but because of a sequence of details too small to ignore. The kind of detail that only bothers you when it joins others, forming something larger than the sum of its parts. He got up before dawn. The house was still bathed in shadows when he crossed the main hallway. The automatic lights took a second to turn on, enough time for him to realize how the place felt different without voices, without footsteps, without routines in progress. Too silent. In the kitchen, he opened the wrong cabinet, then another one. He stopped. He observed the space as if he were there for the first time. There were marks of use that didn't match the idea he had of that house. a chipped glass, a cloth too worn for a spotless environment, a chair slightly pushed away from its original place. None of this was proof of anything, but it was strange. Daniel went up to his home office and opened his laptop. Not to work, just to keep his hands busy. The screen illuminated his tired face as he scrolled through emails without really reading them. That was when he noticed the icon. Small, discreet, familiar, but forgotten. The security system. He stared at the screen for a few seconds without clicking. There was no urgency, no clear accusation, no objective reason to invade his own home through recorded images. Still, something was bothering him. Daniel closed the laptop. He went downstairs again. Naomi was already awake. She was preparing coffee with calm, almost choreographed movements. When she saw him, she smiled politely. "Good morning, sir." He returned the greeting, watching her for a second longer than necessary. "Good morning." Silence. The children came down shortly after, full of energy, all talking at once. Naomi helped them naturally, tied shoelaces, answered questions, reminded them of their schedules. Evelyn appeared last, flawless, as always. "You're up early," she commented, kissing Daniel on the cheek. "I couldn't sleep," he replied. She smiled. "A long trip. It happens." During breakfast, Daniel spoke little. He listened more. He observed the way Evelyn corrected their daughters with calculated softness. How Naomi moved carefully around the table. How the children's eyes sought Naomi before any simple decision. "Can I help Naomi after school?" one of them asked. Evelyn answered before Daniel. "She already has plenty to do." Daniel didn't protest, but he filed that away. Later, when the house emptied, Daniel was alone in the office. The silence returned to impose itself. He opened the laptop again. The icon was still there. This time, he clicked. The cameras appeared in small, organized squares. Hallways, living room, kitchen, laundry room, clean, static images. Nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. He fast-forwarded a few minutes, then a few hours. The routine repeated with almost mechanical precision. Until something changed. It wasn't a shocking scene. It was a tone, a rhythm. Daniel leaned forward, attentive. On the screen, Naomi was folding clothes. Evelyn entered the room. She said something Daniel didn't hear immediately. He adjusted the volume. The voice came out clear, too clear. He froze. He didn't pause the video. He didn't rewind. He just watched. The way Evelyn approached, the exact choice of words, the strategic pause between one sentence and another. Nothing there sounded like guidance. Nothing there looked like a misunderstanding. Daniel felt his stomach churn. He fast-forwarded the video. Another scene. Another day. Another comment. Naomi, always calm. Always contained. Evelyn, always in control. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. Then he opened them again. He kept watching. Each new recording added weight. There was no single moment of explosion, just a steady sequence of small, organized cruelties. The worst part wasn't what was said. It was the fact that it only happened when he wasn't there. Daniel paused the video. The house was silent around him, but his head felt too full. He took a deep breath. He closed the laptop. He stood up. He went to the girls' room. He watched them sleeping for a few seconds, their faces peaceful, unaware of everything. He went back downstairs. Naomi was in the living room, organizing toys. Daniel stopped a few feet from her. "Naomi," he called, his voice firm but controlled. She turned around, surprised. "Yes, sir?" He hesitated for a moment. "I need you to stay here tomorrow afternoon," he said. "All of us." Naomi felt her heart race. "Is there a problem?" Daniel held her gaze for a second longer than usual. "No," he replied. "Just something that needs to be resolved." He walked away without saying anything else. Naomi stood still in the middle of the room, holding a forgotten toy in her hands. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know what he had seen. But for the first time, the silence of the house didn't seem so absolute. In the office, Daniel opened the laptop again. The cursor blinked over a specific recording. He didn't click. Not yet. Because he knew that what he was about to do would change everything. And some decisions need to be made with total clarity. and the house, which had always kept secrets, was about to hear them out loud. The house was too organized that afternoon. Nothing out of place, nothing forgotten, nothing human. Naomi noticed as soon as she entered the living room that excessive order always preceded moments when someone would be put in a place they didn't choose. Daniel arrived early. No phone, no rush, no automatic smile of someone trying to keep the peace. "The girls are leaving now," he said, looking directly at Evelyn. She looked up slowly. "Leaving? Now? To my sister's house? That wasn't the plan. It is now." The tone wasn't aggressive, it was final. The children appeared in the hallway with small backpacks. They hugged Naomi too tightly for a normal goodbye. "Are we coming back?" one of them asked, insecure. Daniel knelt to his daughter's height. "You are, I promise." The door closed. The sound echoed through the large house, sharp, without reverberating. Daniel took a deep breath and turned to the room. "I want everyone here," he said. "Now." Shortly after, the staff gathered. The cook, the gardener, the housekeeper. No one spoke. Everyone felt that this was not a normal conversation. Evelyn remained near the window, elegant, composed, a slight air of boredom on her face. "Is this really necessary?" she asked. "Because if this is some kind of theater—" Daniel didn't answer. He placed the laptop on the coffee table. He opened it carefully. He adjusted the volume. "I want everyone to see," he said. "And listen." Evelyn gave a slight smirk. "Daniel, you've always been too dramatic," he clicked. The image of the laundry room appeared. Naomi folding clothes. The camera fixed. No cuts. Evelyn's voice appeared too clear to be denied. "You need to understand that there are natural limits. Not everyone fits into certain environments. This house demands a standard." Naomi remained still in the recording. In the room, the housekeeper caught her breath. The video fast-forwarded. Another day, another angle. "You might even perform simple tasks well, but that doesn't change who you are. And people like you need to be reminded of that, constantly." The cook took a step back. The gardener clenched his jaw. The next clip came without a pause. "I keep you here because you know how to obey. Don't confuse that with respect." The silence that followed was too heavy to be ignored. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. He let it finish. When the screen went black, he closed the laptop slowly. No one moved. Evelyn was the first to break the silence. "You're out of your mind," she said, letting out a short laugh. "Those are isolated phrases, interpretations. You know how these kinds of people exaggerate." It was then that the housekeeper took a step forward. "It's not an exaggeration," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "She talked to me like that too. Always when you weren't here." The gardener nodded. "To me too, in the same way." Evelyn turned to them, incredulous. "Are you all ganging up on me now?" she asked. "After everything I've done for this house?" She turned her gaze back to Daniel, her eyes hard. "You have no idea what you're doing. I can take everything from you." Daniel kept his voice low. "You can't," she laughed, too loud. "I'll take half of your assets, the house, your businesses. I'll drag you through court for years until you beg to settle." Daniel took a deep breath. "I know you'll take a part of my assets," he said with absolute calm. "But let's see how much the judge gives you when I show these videos." Evelyn blinked, for the first time truly affected. "That doesn't prove anything." Daniel took a step forward. "It proves exactly who you are when you think no one is listening." He held her gaze. "And I'm certain the house and my business, those I will keep." The silence was total. Evelyn looked around. No allies. No extended hands. No complicit looks. "You'll regret this," she said, grabbing her purse. "All of you." Daniel pointed to the door. "Today." She hesitated for a second. Then she turned and left, her heels clicking too fast on the expensive floor. The door closed. This time, with weight. Daniel stood still for a few moments. Then he turned to Naomi. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not seeing it sooner." Naomi felt something finally give way inside her chest. It wasn't immediate crying, it was relief. She wasn't defended with screams. She wasn't saved by violence. The truth was simply exposed. And in the face of it, no one could keep pretending. The house, for the first time, seemed to breathe. Naomi didn't know yet if staying would heal her, or cost her even more. The house became quiet in a different way. It wasn't the rigid silence of before, the kind that controlled steps and words. It was a spacious, almost gentle silence, as if the hallways had finally learned to breathe. Daniel stood still for a few seconds after the door closed. There was no satisfaction on his face, just an old exhaustion now visible. He ran his hand over his forehead, like someone organizing thoughts that arrived too late. "You can go," he said to the staff. "We'll talk calmly tomorrow." The cook nodded, emotional. The housekeeper touched Naomi's arm for a moment, a brief, respectful gesture. The gardener left last, closing the living room door carefully. Only the two of them remained. Naomi was holding a cloth in her hands, folding and unfolding the fabric without realizing it. Her heart was still beating too fast for a moment that called for calm. "You don't need to go back to work today," Daniel said. She looked up, surprised. "I can finish—" "No," he interrupted gently. "Not today." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just full. "I should have seen it sooner," Daniel said at last. "There were signs. I chose not to look." Naomi took a deep breath. "Sometimes," she replied, "people see only what they are able to carry." Daniel nodded, absorbing the sentence. "The girls," he began. "They asked for you as soon as they left." The tightness in Naomi's chest returned, but now, without pain. "They don't like it when things change suddenly," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. "And that says more about me than it does about you." He walked to the window, stood there for a moment, then turned around. "From now on, everything changes." Pause. "But I want you to choose." "Choose?" Naomi repeated. "You can stay," he said, "under new terms. Or you can leave, with all the support necessary to start over." Naomi didn't answer immediately. "My father is sick," she said then, her voice low but firm. "He depends on constant treatment. I never told anyone because I didn't think it mattered." "It matters," Daniel replied. "Very much." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "That's why I prefer to keep the job. Stability," she took a deep breath, "means everything to me right now." Daniel nodded, without questioning. "Then we stay," he said. "Not as an order, as an agreement." He picked up an envelope on the table and placed it in front of her. "This covers any immediate needs regarding your father," he explained. "It's not an advance. It's not a favor. It's support." Naomi didn't touch the envelope immediately. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding." "I still have a lot to learn," he replied. Shortly after, the sound of the front door announced the girls' return. They came in talking at once, backpacks open, questions rushing out. They stopped when they saw Naomi. "Daddy, where's Mommy?" Daniel approached, kneeling in front of his daughters. "Mommy won't be staying here for a while," he said in a calm voice. "I'll explain better later. The important thing is that you're safe." The girls looked at each other. "Does Naomi stay with us?" the other asked. Daniel smiled slightly. "She does." That seemed to be enough. Later, during the simple dinner they prepared together, Naomi noticed something different. Daniel was truly present. He tried to help. He made mistakes. He laughed at himself. "I'm not very good at this," he said, almost apologetically, while washing a plate. "No one is born knowing," Naomi replied with a discreet smile. There was a brief, almost banal moment when they stood side by side at the sink, passing plates, without any rush. There were no promises there, no expectations, just respect. When Naomi went to her room that night, she sat on the bed and picked up her phone. A message from the hospital was waiting. "Condition stable. You can visit tomorrow." She let out her breath slowly. She lay down without turning off the light immediately. The ceiling no longer felt oppressive. In the hallway, she heard light footsteps. Then, the sound of a door being locked. Not to control, but to protect. Naomi closed her eyes. Healing didn't come in grand gestures. It came in small, repeated choices. And in that house, something was beginning to rebuild. Not fast, not easy, but honestly. Time began to pass in a different way in that house. no longer in days marked by tension, but in small routines that reorganized themselves little by little, like furniture being placed in the right spot after years out of alignment. Daniel started to be more present, not like someone trying to make up for the past with exaggerations, but like someone learning to occupy their own space with real attention. He took his daughters to school whenever he could. He sat at the table for breakfast, even when he had important meetings afterward. He learned the teachers' names. He learned the schedules. He learned to listen. Naomi watched everything from a distance, without expectations. She arrived early, as always, prepared coffee, organized backpacks, checked if the two of them had taken what they needed. The difference was that, now, no one watched her as if she were a mistake waiting to happen. She was part of the house. On a gray morning, while zipping up a backpack, the youngest asked, "Are you going to the hospital today?" Naomi hesitated. "I am," she replied. After lunch, "Is your daddy going to get better?" the girl asked, with the cruel and sweet naturalness of childhood. Naomi knelt in front of her. "He's fighting," she said, "and I'm with him." The girl nodded, satisfied with the simple answer. Daniel watched from the doorway. Later that day, he found Naomi in the kitchen, organizing some papers on the table. "Do you want me to drive you to the hospital?" he asked, like someone offering something without any pressure. "You don't have to," she replied. "I'm used to it." He nodded, but didn't leave. "Even so," he said, "if you ever want to, I'm here." She thanked him with a discreet nod. At the hospital, Naomi held her father's hand for longer than usual. She told him simple things. She talked about the girls, about the garden, about the different silence of the house. She didn't mention Evelyn. She didn't need to. When she returned that night, she found the two daughters sitting on the sofa, drawing. "Look," they said, showing the papers. They were simple drawings. A house, 3 figures holding hands, and a sun that was too big for the paper. Daniel smiled when he saw it. "I think you've become an official part of the family art," he commented lightly. Naomi laughed quietly. It was the first time. As the weeks passed, small changes accumulated. Daniel turned the office into a real workspace to stay home more. He turned down trips. He adjusted contracts. The money kept coming in. But the illusion that he needed to disappear to earn it was broken. Naomi noticed something more subtle. He listened. When she talked about her father, he didn't look away. When she said she needed to leave earlier, he didn't ask why. When she stayed silent, he respected it. There were no promises. There were no grand gestures. There was constancy. On a quiet night, while the girls were already asleep, Naomi found Daniel in the living room, sitting on the floor, surrounded by toys. "I'm trying to understand how all of this gets organized," he said, holding up a wrong puzzle piece. She sat down beside him. "Sometimes it doesn't get organized," she replied. "It just keeps going." He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. "You never spoke ill of her," he said suddenly. Naomi thought before answering. "Because what she did speaks for itself," she said softly. "And because carrying that wouldn't take me anywhere." Daniel nodded. "I spent a lot of time thinking silence was comfort," he confessed. "Now I understand that sometimes it's abandonment." Naomi didn't answer. But something in that moment clicked. It wasn't immediate romance. It wasn't a declaration. It was recognition. Days later, while walking together to the gate to pick up the girls, Daniel said, "You stayed when you didn't have to." Naomi stopped. "I stayed because I had to," she replied. "But also because..." She hesitated. "Because I felt that, for the first time, someone was willing to truly change." Daniel took a deep breath. "I'm still learning." She smiled. "Me too." That night, Naomi went back to her room and picked up her phone. Another message from the hospital. Results stable. Positive next steps. She sat on the bed, holding the device with both hands, and let a tear run down without any rush. It wasn't sadness. It was relief. Outside, she heard the girls' low laughter before they fell asleep. Then, footsteps in the hallway. A light turned off with care. Naomi lay down and closed her eyes. The world hadn't become fair all of a sudden, but it had become possible, and sometimes that was all someone needed to keep going. Because the silence that protects is very different from the silence that hurts. Some people stay silent not because they are weak, but because they are surviving. And the truth doesn't rush. It waits until it can speak for itself. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you like and subscribe. You'll receive emotional stories that remind us kindness still matters.